And we're back with our panel and Senator Ted Cruz in our center seat. Okay, Jonah.
Senator, on the issue of ISIS, as I understand it, your position is really full-throated air campaign plus arming the Kurds.
Yes.
You haven't really talked about arming the Sunni tribes. We can leave that out for the moment. But is it really plausible to think that the Kurds, no matter how many arms you give them, are going to liberate Mosul? They're going to, they'll protect their own borders, but they're not. Is it realistic to expect them to do much more than that?
What is plausible is that, number one, air power, when used aggressively, can have a dramatic impact. Right now, we've got such restrictive rules of engagement that it is more pinprick strike. It is a bomb here, it's a missile there. I've characterized it as photo op foreign policy, rather than using concerted, overwhelming air power to take out ISIS. Secondly, you're right, the Kurds can't solve everything, but they're right now fighting and winning on the ground, and it is a miracle that they are, because ISIS is using U.S. military equipment they've seized in Iraq. The Kurds' equipment is hopelessly outclassed, and yet they're fighting this administration because it is obsessed with seeking conciliation between the Sunni and Shias and uniting Iraq. It sends weaponry to Baghdad that doesn't pass it on to the Kurds. That doesn't make any sense at all. We ought to use the Kurds as boots on the ground along with overwhelming air power. Now, that could likely involve embedding more special forces in to target that air power, but I think our principal boots on the ground can be the Kurds, and we should be giving them the tools to defeat ISIS.
Senator, we asked Twitter and Facebook to weigh in. Tom Pinkerton wrote this: how will the foreign policy of Ted Cruz specifically differ from that of Barack Obama and George W. Bush?
Markedly different. Yes. The last 6.5 years, we've seen the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. Leading from behind is how they memorably summed it up. And what happens is America has receded from the world. Today, our friends and allies, they don't trust us. And our enemies, they don't fear us. I think we should get back, number one, to American leadership in the world. That means speaking out with a clarion voice for freedom, speaking out for the oppressed, speaking out for people like Pastor Saeed Abedini, an American pastor imprisoned in Iran, speaking out for people like Leopoldo Lopez, the Venezuelan opposition leader who's been wrongfully imprisoned and is on the 29th day, I believe, of a hunger strike. This president is silent in using the bully pulpit of speaking for freedom. But at the same time, any U.S. military force, we have always been exceedingly reluctant to engage in military force. It's worth remembering, biggest country Reagan ever invaded was Grenada. Any military force should be dictated by the vital national security interests of the United States, and if and when we use force, we should use overwhelming force for a clearly stated objective, and then when we're done, we should get the heck out. You ask where I differ with George W. Bush? I don't think we should be engaged in nation building. It's not our job to turn foreign nations into democratic utopias, to try to turn Iraq into Switzerland. It is the military's job to hunt down and kill our enemies, to kill ISIS before they murder American citizens and they wage jihad.
Mark.
Would you put more U.S. combat troops, I guess we call them advisors, in Iraq? Would you put them embedded, on the front lines to do what everyone says has to be done if you're going to use more air power? Be spotters, call in the strikes. And how many more troops do you think we need there?
The current policy we're following makes no sense. So the advisors that we're sending in are not able to be effective, and the reason is the commander-in-chief hasn't set an objective, hasn't set the right objective of destroying ISIS and using overwhelming military power to do so. Last year in the Senate Armed Services Committee, I asked Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, I said, if the object were to destroy ISIS in 90 days, militarily, what would be required for that? General Dempsey responded, I'm sorry, that's impossible. I said, okay, General, if that time frame is unrealistic, you tell me, in your military expertise, what would be required not to degrade, not to weaken, but to destroy ISIS, and what time frame is reasonable? His answer was, he said, there is no military solution to this. We have to change the conditions on the ground, the poverty, so that young men are not attracted to radicalism. Now, with all respect to General Dempsey, that's utter nonsense. The answer is not expanded Medicaid in Iraq. And the problem with our military strategy is the commander-in-chief hasn't laid an object. We are going to make it so that if anyone joins ISIS, he is signing his death certificate. Right now, radical Islamic terrorism, it is the perception of many that ISIS is winning. And that only strengthens them. And the reason is the commander-in-chief hasn't laid out the objective on the question of boots on the ground. There are some politicians in Washington that beat their chest. They want to show they're tough, so they say absolutely boots on the ground. There are others who say never boots on the ground. I think that question should follow the expert military advice once the objective has been set by the commander-in-chief of destroying ISIS.
No specific number.
It's not an arbitrary number for armchair generals who are politicians.
Yeah, but you want to be president.
But as president, I wouldn't be making the day-to-day combat decisions. The job of the commander-in-chief is to lay the objective out. And then you rely upon the generals and admirals and commanders to give you their expert advice on the tools needed to carry out that objective.
Senator, thank you. We have one more segment, center seat. We'll start with George Will after the break.